The grand ballroom at the Plaza Hotel sparkled with crystal chandeliers and white roses as Manhattan's elite gathered to celebrate my parents' 30th wedding anniversary. Richard and Catherine Montgomery had spared no expense for their milestone celebration, inviting 300 of their closest friends, business associates and society connections to witness their enduring love story. I stood near the entrance, smoothing down the simple black dress I'd chosen for the occasion. To most observers, it appeared understated, almost plain, a sleek silhouette that fell just below the knee with clean lines and minimal embellishment. But that was exactly the point. True luxury whispered, it never shouted. "Olivia, darling, there you are." Mom's voice carried across the marble foyer as she swept toward me in a shimmering gold gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. At 55, Catherine Montgomery was still a stunning woman, her auburn hair perfectly coiffed and her jewelry sparkling under the lights. "Happy anniversary, Mom," I said, leaning in to kiss her cheek carefully to avoid disturbing her makeup. She pulled back slightly, her smile faltering as she took in my appearance. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "please don't embarrass us with that cheap dress, honey." I blinked, taken aback by the directness of her criticism. "Excuse me." Mom glanced around nervously, making sure no one was listening. "I know money has been tight for you since you started that little fashion thing, but tonight is so important. The Astors are here, the Vanderbilts, half the board of the Met Museum. These people notice everything." "Fashion thing," I repeated quietly. "You know what I mean," she said, reaching into her purse. "Here, take this." She pressed her emergency credit card into my palm. "Run to Bergdorf's right now and get something appropriate. A proper cocktail dress, something that shows you belong here." I stared at the credit card, then at my mother's anxious face. "Mom, you think I bought this dress because I couldn't afford anything better?" "Well..." She hesitated, clearly trying to be diplomatic. "I know you're working very hard on your designs and I think it's wonderful that you're following your passion. But reality is reality, sweetheart. Starting a fashion line takes years to become profitable, and in the meantime, you can't show up to events like this looking like you shop at discount stores." Before I could respond, my father appeared beside us, resplendent in his custom tuxedo. Richard Montgomery commanded attention wherever he went, 6 feet tall with distinguished silver hair and the bearing of a man who'd built a real estate empire from nothing. "There's my beautiful daughter," he said, though I caught the slight tightening around his eyes as he registered my outfit. "Olivia, you look lovely. Doesn't she?" Mom said with forced brightness. I was just telling her how much I adore that dress. Dad's expression grew more serious. "Actually, sweetheart, I'm glad I caught you before the reception starts. I wanted to have a quick word." He guided me to a quieter corner of the foyer, away from the arriving guests. "Olivia, I know tonight might be overwhelming. The guest list includes some very successful people, CEOs, politicians, cultural leaders. I don't want you to feel out of place." "Out of place? What your father means," Mom interjected, having followed us, "is that we know you're still finding your way professionally. There's no shame in that. Everyone takes different paths." Dad nodded. "Exactly. When people ask what you do, just say you're in fashion. You don't need to go into details about the current state of your business." I felt a familiar knot forming in my stomach. "The current state of my business?" "Oh, honey," Mom said sadly, "we know you've been struggling. Living in that tiny studio apartment, working all hours, barely making ends meet. We see how stressed you've been." "Your mother's right," Dad added gently. "Starting a company is incredibly difficult. The failure rate is astronomical, especially in fashion. We're proud of you for trying, but we also don't want you to suffer needlessly." Mom brightened suddenly. "Actually, I have wonderful news. I spoke to Miranda Whitfield last week. You remember Miranda? She runs that lovely boutique in the Upper East Side? Well, she's looking for a shop girl. It would be perfect for you. You'd learn the business from the ground up, meet wealthy clients and make a steady salary." "A shop girl," I said slowly. "Don't say it like that," Dad chided. "There's honor in honest work. Miranda's boutique caters to very exclusive clientele. It would be excellent experience. Plus," Mom added excitedly, "Miranda said she might even carry a few of your designs eventually. If they're suitable, of course." I looked at my parents. These people who had raised me, supported me through college and genuinely believed they were helping, and felt a wave of sadness wash over me. They saw my life through the lens of their own experiences, their own definitions of success and failure. That's very thoughtful, I said carefully. But I think I'll continue with what I'm doing. Dad's expression grew concerned. Olivia, I admire your determination, but you can't live on dreams forever. You need stability, security. At 26, you should be thinking about your future, marriage, children, building something lasting. Your father's right, Mom agreed. Look around this room. These women all married successful men who could provide for them. Even the ones who work do so by choice, not out of necessity. I work by choice too, I said. Darling, Mom's voice took on that patient tone she'd used when I was a child having a tantrum, working 18 hours a day in a cramped apartment, barely able to afford groceries, living paycheck to paycheck. That's not choice, that's desperation. How do you know I'm living paycheck to paycheck? Dad and Mom exchanged glances. Honey, Dad said gently, we pay for your health insurance. We see the credit report when you were added to our family plan. We know about the student loans, the maxed out credit cards, the late rent payments. My blood ran cold. You've been monitoring my credit? We worry about you, Mom said defensively. When you stopped accepting our help last year, we had to find other ways to make sure you were okay. And frankly, what we found was very concerning. Which is why, Dad continued, we think it's time to be practical. Take the job with Miranda. Move back home for a while to save money. Give yourself time to figure out what you really want to do with your life. I stared at them, these two people who thought they knew everything about my situation, and realized that the conversation I'd been dreading for months was finally happening. The conversation where I would have to choose between continuing to let them believe I was failing or revealing the truth about what I'd actually built. What if I told you, I said slowly, that I don't need Miranda's job? Sweetheart, Mom said pityingly, of course you don't need it. No one needs any particular job. But you need income, stability, a future. No, I mean, what if I told you that my business is actually doing well? Dad's eyebrows rose skeptically. Define well. Well enough that I don't have to worry about rent or groceries or student loans. Olivia, Mom said with a mixture of love and exasperation, we know how much fashion designers make when they're starting out. Even successful ones barely break even for the first few years. That's true for most fashion designers, I agreed. But I'm not most fashion designers. Before either of them could respond, a familiar voice called out from across the foyer. Olivia Montgomery. Oh my God, is that you? I turned to see Sophia Chin approaching, resplendent in a stunning emerald gown that I recognized immediately because I'd designed it specifically for her. Sophia was a rising Hollywood star, known for her impeccable red carpet style and her tendency to make headlines wherever she went. Sophia, I said warmly, accepting her enthusiastic hug. You look incredible. Are you kidding me? She stepped back and gestured at her dress. This is pure magic. When I wore the red version to the Golden Globes, it literally broke the internet. I've never felt more beautiful. My parents were staring at this exchange with growing confusion. Mom leaned over to Dad and whispered loudly, how does she know Sophia Chin? Sophia overheard and laughed. How do I know Olivia? She's only the most sought-after designer in Hollywood right now. I'm on a 2-year waiting list for her custom pieces. Waiting list? Dad asked faintly. Oh, absolutely, Sophia said, addressing my parents directly. Your daughter is incredibly exclusive. She only takes 20 custom clients per year and the waiting list is insane. I had to call in favors just to get this dress for tonight. Mom was looking back and forth between Sophia and me like she was watching a tennis match. But Olivia is just starting out. She works from a studio apartment. Studio apartment? Sophia laughed again. You mean her design atelier in Soho? It's gorgeous, 3 floors, the most incredible workspace I've ever seen. Although I heard she's expanding into that building next door too. I caught my parents' expressions and felt a mixture of sympathy and satisfaction. They were clearly struggling to reconcile what they thought they knew about my life with what they were hearing. Sophia, I said gently, maybe we should. Oh. Sophia interrupted, her eyes lighting up. Did you see that Vogue article last month? The New Guard, young designers reshaping luxury fashion. Your spread was absolutely stunning. Vogue. Mom whispered. The cover story, Sophia confirmed. Although honestly, the photos didn't do justice to your pieces. They're even more beautiful in person. Dad found his voice. Olivia was on the cover of Vogue? Well, not the cover, I said quickly. It was just a feature inside. Just a feature? Sophia looked at me incredulously. It was 8 pages. And they called you the future of American fashion, or something like that. An awkward silence fell over our little group. I could see my parents' minds racing, trying to process this information that contradicted everything they believed about my life. I should go find my table, Sophia said, sensing the tension. But Olivia, we absolutely must do lunch next week. I have 3 events coming up and I'm desperate for something new. She kissed my cheek and swept away, leaving my parents and me standing in uncomfortable silence. Vogue, Mom said finally, her voice barely audible. Mom, I can explain. You were in Vogue magazine and you didn't tell us? It's not that simple. How is it not that simple? Dad's voice was rising slightly. Our daughter is featured in the most important fashion magazine in the world and we had to find out from a movie star? Because I knew you'd react like this, I said honestly. Because I knew you'd make a big deal out of it. Make a big deal? Mom looked hurt. Olivia, this is incredible news. This is the kind of success we've been praying you'd find. Is it? Because 5 minutes ago you were trying to get me a job as a shop girl. Dad ran his hand through his silver hair. We believed you were struggling. The credit report showed. The credit report showed what I wanted it to show, I said quietly. I keep my business finances completely separate from my personal accounts. The apartment lease, the credit cards, the student loans, those are all in my name as Olivia Montgomery, private individual. The business operates under a different name entirely. Different name? Mom asked weakly. I reached into my small evening bag and pulled out a business card, handing it to my father. He read it aloud. Victoria Stone, Creative Director, Stone Atelier. Victoria Stone? Dad looked up at me. But that's my middle name and maternal grandmother's maiden name, I finished. I wanted complete separation between my family connections and my professional reputation. I wanted to succeed or fail based purely on my own merit. Mom sank into a nearby chair that was part of the foyer's elegant seating area. So when Sophia said you only take 20 custom clients per year, I limit myself to ensure quality. Each piece is completely bespoke, handcrafted, taking anywhere from 3 to 6 months to complete. And the waiting list? Currently at about 18 months for new clients. Dad was still staring at the business card. What does something like that cost? I hesitated. It depends on the complexity of the design, the materials, the timeline. Ballpark, he pressed. The base price for a custom gown is $50,000. The number hung in the air like a physical thing. Mom actually gripped the arms of her chair. 50,000, she repeated slowly. Dollars. For one dress. For a completely unique piece of art that will never be replicated. Most of my clients consider it an investment. And you make 20 of these per year? Dad was doing rapid mental calculations. 20 custom pieces, yes. But that's just the couture line. I also have ready-to-wear collections, licensing deals, and I'm launching a luxury accessories line next month. Mom stood up abruptly. I need to see the dress tag. What? The dress you're wearing. If what you're saying is true, if you're really this Victoria Stone person. I smiled and turned around, lifting my hair to reveal the small label sewn discreetly into the back neckline. Mom leaned in to read it and I watched her face go completely white. Victoria Stone Atelier, she read in a whisper. Exclusive custom creation. This isn't from my ready-to-wear line, I explained. I made it specifically for tonight. It took me 6 weeks. You made this. Every stitch. Hand-sewn silk from Lyon, France. The fabric alone cost $8,000. Dad appeared at Mom's shoulder to look at the label himself. You're wearing an $8,000 dress that you made yourself for our anniversary party? The labor and design work would actually bring the total value to around $50,000 if I were to price it for a client. But since I made it for myself. $50,000, Mom said faintly. I told you it looked cheap. It's supposed to look understated, I explained gently. True luxury doesn't need to announce itself. The people who matter will recognize quality when they see it. As if summoned by my words, another familiar voice joined our conversation. Olivia Montgomery. I thought that was you. We turned to see Patricia Asters approaching. Yes, those Asters, wearing a midnight blue gown that I'd created for her daughter's wedding 6 months earlier. Patricia, I said warmly, you look stunning. Well, I should hope so considering what I paid for this dress, she said with a laugh. Although it was worth every penny. I've never received so many compliments. My parents were staring again. Patricia Asters was New York royalty, the kind of woman who appeared on the society pages and served on the boards of major cultural institutions. Are you two related? Patricia asked, looking between my parents and me. These are my parents, I said. Richard and Catherine Montgomery. Oh, how wonderful. Patricia extended her hand graciously. You must be so proud. Your daughter is absolutely extraordinary. She's revolutionizing American fashion. So we're learning, Dad said weakly. I've been trying to get her to design something for the Met Gala next year, Patricia continued. Although I know her waiting list is impossibly long. The Met Gala? Mom asked. Oh yes, half the attendees are desperate to wear her designs. Although I suppose that's not surprising given her success. Patricia excused herself to find her table, and we were left alone again with the weight of these revelations settling around us. The Met Gala, Mom said to herself. One of my clients is on the planning committee, I explained. She's been asking me to create pieces for several attendees. How long? Dad asked suddenly. How long what? How long have you been successful like this? I considered the question. The business became profitable in year 2. By year 3 I had more demand than I could handle. This is year 4. For years, Mom said. You've been famous for 4 years and we had no idea. I'm not famous. I'm successful. There's a difference. Olivia, Dad said seriously, why didn't you tell us? Why let us think you were struggling? I sat down in the chair next to where Mom had been sitting, needing a moment to gather my thoughts. Because I needed to prove to myself that I could do it. That I could build something meaningful without anyone being able to say I succeeded because of family money or connections. But we wouldn't have said that, Mom protested. Wouldn't you? Dad, you built Montgomery Real Estate from nothing. You're incredibly proud of that fact and you should be. But part of the reason you're proud is because you know you did it yourself. Dad was quiet for a long moment. I suppose that's true. I wanted that same feeling. I wanted to know that when I looked at what I'd built, it was mine. Completely mine. But at what cost? Mom asked. We've been worried sick about you. We thought you were barely getting by, that you were too proud to ask for help. I know and I'm sorry. But I also knew that if I told you the truth, everything would change. You'd start introducing me differently at parties. You'd want to invest in the business or offer advice or connect me with your wealthy friends. And all of that would have tainted what I was building. So instead you let us think you were failing, Dad said. I let you think I was struggling, which in some ways I was. Building a business is hard even when it's successful. The pressure, the responsibility, the constant decisions, that's all real regardless of the profit margins. Mom reached over and took my hand. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm sorry we didn't see what you were accomplishing. And I'm sorry for treating you like you needed our rescue, Dad added. You clearly didn't need anything from us. That's not true, I said quickly. I needed your love and support, even if I couldn't accept your financial help. I needed to know that you believed in me as a person, not just as a business owner. We do believe in you, Mom said firmly. We always have. Even when you thought I was failing? Especially when we thought you were failing, Dad said. We were proud of you for following your dreams, even when we thought those dreams weren't working out. That takes courage. I felt tears threatening and blinked them back carefully to preserve my makeup. Thank you. That means more than you know. So, Mom said, clearly trying to process everything, when you said money was tight. I live modestly because I prefer it that way. The studio apartment is perfect for my needs, quiet, good light, close to my suppliers. I don't need a mansion. But you could afford one? I could afford several, actually. But that's not who I am. Dad shook his head in amazement. Our daughter, the secret fashion mogul. I prefer designer, I said with a smile. How much? Mom asked suddenly. How much what? The business. How much is it worth? I hesitated. Mom, I don't think. Ballpark, she pressed, using Dad's earlier phrase. I sighed. Last year's revenue was $12 million. This year we're on track for 18 million. Silence. Million, Dad repeated slowly. With an M, I confirmed. Mom stood up and walked a few steps away, then turned back to face me. $12 million in revenue. That's gross revenue, not profit, I clarified. After expenses, materials, staff, taxes. How much profit? Dad asked. About 60% margin on the custom pieces, 40% on ready-to-wear. More silence while they did the math. Our daughter is a millionaire, Mom said to Dad. Multimillionaire, I corrected quietly. And we tried to get you a job as a shop girl, Dad said, laughing despite himself. To be fair, you didn't know. Because you didn't tell us. Because I was terrified you'd react exactly like this. We looked at each other and suddenly all three of us were laughing, the kind of laughter that comes after intense emotion when relief and absurdity collide. Well, Mom said, wiping her eyes carefully, I suppose I should apologize for criticizing your cheap dress. It's not cheap, I reminded her. It just looks understated. $50,000 understated, Dad added, still shaking his head. The most expensive thing I've ever worn was my wedding dress, Mom said. And that was $2,000, which I thought was extravagant at the time. Different worlds, I agreed. So what happens now? Dad asked. Do we pretend we don't know? Tell you know, I said simply. And hopefully you can be proud of what I've built, not despite what you thought was failure, but because of what it actually is. We are proud, Mom said firmly. Incredibly proud. But also a little hurt that you felt you couldn't trust us with the truth. It wasn't about trust. It was about necessity. I needed to become this person without anyone else's expectations or assistance. And now that I have. Now that you have, we'd love to be part of your world, Dad finished. If you'll let us. I'd like that, I said honestly. Although it might take some adjustment for all of us. Mom laughed. I'll say. I've been saving up to buy you a nice dress for Christmas. Now I'm wondering what on earth I could possibly give you that you couldn't buy for yourself. The same thing you've always given me, I said. Your love and support. That's still the most valuable thing you have. Even for a millionaire fashion designer? Especially for a millionaire fashion designer. The reception was beginning and guests were moving toward the ballroom. Dad offered me his arm and Mom took his other side. One more question, Mom said as we walked. Are you happy? Really, truly happy with the life you've built? I thought about my days, designing pieces that made women feel beautiful, working with incredibly talented artisans, building something meaningful and lasting. I'm incredibly happy, Mom. This is exactly the life I dreamed of having. Then that's all that matters, she said. Although next time you're in Vogue, we'd appreciate a heads up. Deal, I laughed. As we entered the ballroom, I noticed several heads turning our way. Some recognized me as Victoria Stone. Others simply noticed the quality of my dress. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was hiding anything from the people who mattered most. By the way, Dad said quietly as we found our table, I'm changing my introduction speech. Dad, no. I'm proud of my daughter, the successful fashion designer, he said firmly. And everyone here is going to know it. I smiled, realizing that some secrets were meant to be revealed, and some revelations were worth the temporary discomfort they caused. My parents knew the truth now, and somehow that made everything I'd built feel even more real, even more mine. The evening continued with new understanding, new respect, and the kind of pride that comes not from hiding who you are, but from finally being seen for who you've become.